Um, Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 3 of Cinema LatinXperience Mexico. I am your host, Nico Trevino. I am here with Faiza Kracheni. We are going to be talking about the third film of this series, Silent Light, directed by Carlos Regadas. This film was debuted in 2007 and made its feature in the United States in 2007 as well. Yes, so joined with me, we have Faiza, and she's going to introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Faiza. I am based in Austin, Texas. I am both Arab and Mexican, so you may remember me from the Women in Arab Cinema with Emily last month. And yeah, I'm a filmmaker and a nonprofit director, and I also founded my own film festival with a couple of other women in Austin in 2017 called Transform Film Fest.
Awesome. Okay, well, yes, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for your return. Now with this series, it's awesome to have you. So again, today we're going to be talking about Silent Light. This is a film that is from Carlos Regadas. He is a Mexican filmmaker. However, this film is not in Spanish like one would normally expect. This film is actually, save for a few lines of dialogue, spoken entirely in Plaudeutsch. I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly. However, this is a dialect specifically to this group of people known as Mennonites. They are a fundamental religious group, kind of like a sect similar to the Amish. They have their own sort of laws, religion, and they're actually classified as an ethno-religious group due to their background. Anyway, we'll talk more about them later, but I do just want to mention that this film, although it is filmed entirely on set in Chihuahua, Mexico, they do speak Plaudeutsch, which is their dialect. It's similar to German with influences of Dutch. So what we're witnessing on screen here is sort of this group that is, unfamiliar to Mexico. They kind of remain in an isolated community, an isolated colony, if you will, in Chihuahua, near the city of Chihuahua, in a rural sort of settlement. There are many communities, and there are about 90% of the Mennonites who are in Mexico live in Chihuahua. So this is an ethno-religious group that has made their way to Mexico in 1922. So what we're seeing is a colony that's about 100 years old at the time of this film, which again was in 2007. So with that as the background, we find our character protagonist Johan, and he is a man married to a woman named Esther, and together they have about 7 children. They live in this colony, a small house in a rural environment, very similar to West Texas. For those of you listening who are from Texas and have ever been there, very similar to the Big Bend, Chisos Mountains region. Chihuahua is only about 2.5 hours away. So geographically very similar. And anyway, so Johan has a love affair with a woman named Marianne. And in this dynamic, this sort of love triangle, we just kind of witness, the events unfolding. Anyway, Faiza, do you have anything that you want to say about this movie? Any initial thoughts, if you, I guess, even enjoyed it?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. And something that I kind of wrote, because like when I was watching it, I was kind of taking notes because they're like, for such a slow like film that's more about like, it's like a character study almost of like these people. There's so much, like there's so much in the shots. And so like coming from a background, like I gravitate towards films as like escapism. So like I tend to lean very heavily on like surrealism and like horror and like wildly experimental films. But I love, like, one of my top 5 filmmakers is Terrence Malick. And so I went into this film blind. Like, I did, and I wasn't familiar with the director. I did like do a quick Google search because I had to find it on YouTube. And so I didn't really want to read about it before I watched it. And so when I started watching it, I remember initially when I was watching it and it was like the beginning part of the sun rising, I was just like, when is this shit gonna like get popping? like this is like so long.
Yes.
I was like expecting like a character to like walk in or something. I like paused it, went to the bathroom, came back, like still another 2 minutes of the sunrise. But then when it actually started, like, for having like such small dialogue, the film was very compelling visually to watch. And so I think for people that may not like resonate with like slow cinema, or like more like character study, realistic films, like I feel like this film does that really well. And there are a lot of like stinkers out there that try to do things like this. But I really enjoyed it, and the cinematography was absolutely beautiful. But afterwards, I did read about it because, and I'm sure we'll get to that because I was like really confused about the ending. and and when I was reading about it, I read that like this director just like generally uses real people, like he doesn't use actors, which I really love Harmony Korine, and like he does that a lot in his films as well. And so then I found that out, and you would never know that. Like you wouldn't know that if you didn't read it. So I thought that was super cool. Were the actors Mennonites, like real Mennonites, or?
Yes. So, yeah, I had never heard of this movie before. I had known of this director. So my sort of research into the film after watching it was more, again, on focusing on the Mennonites themselves, kind of this community. What are they doing in Mexico? Never heard of them. So yes, to answer your question, pretty much every single character in this film is a real life Mennonite. Even Miriam Tays, who plays Esther, the wife, she is a Mennonite from Canada, from Manitoba. And so she actually has this like really wild side story that can be explored, completely separate from this film. But she's an author, she's a novelist, and so she actually wrote a book that I think was released in 2012 that kind of focused in on her experience with this set. But yeah, Johann, his name is Cornelius something, I'm not familiar, but he himself, Marianne, all the children, every single one of them are real life Mennonites, non-professional actors. I think Miriam Tays, Esther, I think she might have the most sort of contact with the outside world, because this is like a very isolated community. And something that's interesting that I found from this group of people, these Mennonites, is part of their religion. For those of you who don't know, Mennonites are like fairly similar to the Amish. So they kind of have like a very conventional, traditional way of, they make their own food. They grow their own food. They make their own clothes, and they sort of reject modern technology. So in this film set in 2007, they have like trucks and tractors because they are agrarian farmers. They have a watch, they have like some modern technologies, but no phones, no internet. And again, something that I read is like they actually reject imagery. So there are no icons in their religion. There's no sort of photograph. There's no they don't allow internet or movies or pictures. They don't even allow music. Like they're pretty far removed from society. So the way that the director Carlos Regadas like sort of eased his way into this community was, you know, creating this relationship between these real life actors, or these, I'm sorry, these real life Mennonites. And with the help of Miriam Tays, he sort of, with her help, like created a very strong bond and trust with these people. And had she not helped him, like this film would have never been made, because it was her that was like, hey, you know, we're going against all of our beliefs in religion, against like iconography and images, and we're going to make this film. And everyone was willing, you know, everyone was like, okay, you know, we'll participate. So this is like, other than maybe a few documentaries, this is like the only film known about Mennonites. So
Wow, that's nuts. That's nuts to me because second. Sorry.
Okay, so for anyone just listening, Faiza's dog kind of squeezed herself into the room. Okay.
All right, I'm back. What I was gonna say is like, I actually like didn't think about that. Like I know that Mennonites and like Amish and you know other like secular groups like that, like they, you know, they don't have technology and all that kind of stuff, or they reject it. But I never thought about the complexities of like actually, because it's interesting to me. Like the director didn't want to make a documentary about Mennonites. He wanted
Mhm.
to cast Mennonites in a narrative film based on the Mennonites. Like that's very interesting to me. And also I like I like want to research more on like how he gained their trust, because if they don't have TV or like any of those things, like this film was like I think nominated for an Independent Spirit Award, on the short list for like the Oscars, like all these prestigious festivals, but like they don't give a shit about that stuff, you know?
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
it's
It's
like, what
so
was in it for
wild.
them, you know? Like what compelled them? Because it would be one thing if it was a documentary, right? Like, oh, we want to educate people on the Mennonites and like, you know, spread awareness that we're here and in our histories and whatever. But it's another thing to be like, hey, I want you to be in this narrative script that I wrote about y'all, but it's all based on fictional characters, you know, like, or
It's
non-fictional characters. Sorry.
correct. Yeah. No, it's absolutely mind blowing. Just like you, I would love to know the research, or I'd love to do some research and figure out a little bit more as to how, you know, how did he convince them? And that's just like, you're absolutely right. They don't give a shit about the Oscars. They don't care about the Ariel Awards, the Mexican equivalent of the Oscars. It's that to them is, um, you know, it's too worldly. Um, it's false. You know, it just like in the film, you know, Johann is speaking with his father, and he's talking about like the devil, and I can only just imagine like, you know, this is the sort of the devil, like the internet, modern times is the antithesis to their religion and to their tradition. So yeah, it's really fascinating, and sparks my curiosity as to how that even went down. Um, but from the research that I did do, again, Miriam Tays kind of like stepped in with the crew and the cast, and sort of like, okay, this is okay, we can do this, you know, it's going to be all right, these are good people with good intentions, you know, it's not going to be exploiting this group of people. I gathered that from my research, but you know, the details of it all are beyond me. So
Yeah.
anyway.
It was interesting with this film because I kind of went down this rabbit hole with the Mennonites, and it reminded me of something that my mom told me recently that like blew my mind, which was I was like over at her house. This is just like a mini side story, sorry, but I was like over at her house and she like brought out this like really old jewelry box, and my my mom's side of the family is the family that is Mexican and from Mexico, from Guanajuato. And she brought out this little jewelry box, and she was like, this is like some stuff that, you know, was my mom's and my grandmother, so my great grandmother and my grandfather. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And I was just like looking at it, and it was like a really small box with not that much stuff in it. And then I picked up this ring, and I was like, whoa, what the fuck? And she was like, what? And I was like, why do you have a Freemason ring?
Oh, wow.
And she was like, oh, El Mason, El Mason. And I was like, what? And she was like, oh, my grandfather, he was a Freemason in Mexico. And I was like, holy shit, I didn't know Freemasons were in Mexico. And then I like did this whole deep dive, and sure enough, there were. And he was a fucking Freemason. So anyway,
Wild.
we think of that. But she was just like, no big deal. And she was like, oh yeah, I have to find it. It's in the garage, but I have this old picture of him, and he has on everything, and he's standing next to my grandmother. And I was like,
She's involved in it too, or?
yeah. Like, what the hell? Cool. And also weird. But yeah, it just made me think of that. Like, a lot of people think of Mexico, and they have like this idea in their head of like what Mexico is, but you know, people only graze the surface. So when I found out there were Mennonites there, I was like, of course there's Mennonites there. Like, there's fucking Freemasons, there's all this shit there, you know, because of like colonization and stuff. I say it like it's this patent, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, of course. I mean, and that's, you know, that's specifically why I chose this film. Okay, disclaimer here for those listening. This was not my first choice for the third week of this series. I had another film in mind, and lo and behold, it was not available in the United States. So I kind of did some scrambling, and I found this movie, but it fits so perfectly with this series, in my opinion, that, you know, talking about the LatinXperience and, you know, the diversity, the richness in culture and ethnicity and language and everything really about Mexico, that people really do underestimate it. You know, me myself, like, I underestimate Mexico all the fucking time. The world underestimates Mexico. It's so common. And you're absolutely right. Like, this film just inherently challenges and it begs the question, you know, what does it mean to be Mexican? Who is a Mexican? What is inside Mexico? And all of these little like pockets and niche stories are out there, and they exist, and these experiences are just, you know, they're not necessarily unique to Mexico, but Mexico has them, you know. And this story, I have a few paragraphs written again about the Mennonites and about Carlos Regadas, the director, and to give it context again, it's been almost 100 years. You know, we're in 2020 now. So in 1922, the Mennonites fled Canada because Canada started imposing a lot of rules and regulation in the Mennonite schools. So they were just like, you need to be more secular, you need to be more contemporary and modern with Canadian dealings, you know, whatever. And so basically Mexico, I forget the president at the time, but the Mexican president invited the Mennonites to come to Chihuahua and settle there. And in Manitoba, it's a you know, it's kind of like the breadbasket of Canada. They have a lot of agriculture there. So coming to Mexico, they were able to just carry on with their traditions and their way of life, in the sense that they can cultivate land and, you know, survive with that. And actually, you know, to sidestep here real quick, the Mennonites in Chihuahua, like, they are a huge part of their economy. Like, they produce so much food for Chihuahua, and like, they really do contribute to the state of Chihuahua and to the country of Mexico. Like, you can't separate them. They are an isolated group socially, but like, you know, they do contribute. But anyway, so it's been almost 100 years since the Mennonites fled Canada and went to Mexico. And basically, like, those are who are in Chihuahua right now, you know, they have their experiences where they speak Spanish and they interact with Mexicans. And part of the migration, I guess, like the fleeing, the taking of refuge in Mexico, it did trickle down to other parts of Latin America. So in Bolivia, in Argentina, there are settlements of Mennonites who, you know, yes, they speak Spanish or a dialect of Spanish, but they're interacting with Argentines, they're interacting with Bolivians. So their experiences are unique to them. Whereas in, like, with the Mexican Mennonites, that is a unique experience altogether. So that's, you know, where this film fits into this series is just like, you know, what does it mean to be Mexican? You know, it's going back to Roma, which is the second film of this series, the indigenous population of Mexico, which has been neglected and sort of, like, very much so disenfranchised and exploited and even wiped off the face of the earth, you know, through colonialization. They still exist, and it's a different ethnicity. It's a different race of people, yet it is part of Mexico. And I guess, you know, the Mennonites in Mexico, although they're not necessarily like from there, they have been there for a century. And I think that, like, is enough time at least to create some sort of identity amongst the Mennonite community of Mexican Mennonites, amongst others. But anyway.
Yeah, I was like really confused when I started watching the film because, again, I went into it blind. I didn't read about it when I was going in, and I was watching it off of YouTube. And then, you know, after the really long sunset scene and then it sets in, see a bunch of white people sitting around a table, and I was like, am I watching the right film? And I was like, that doesn't sound like Spanish. And so then I like went back to YouTube and like Googled it again. And then I was like, I guess this is the film. And I was just like wildly confused. And then so like during it, and then they were calling him Juan.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, and Juanito, and I was like, what the fuck am I watching? and then I kind of started picking it up, but like it was this like very wild experience for me because I didn't go into the movie thinking that, and like I was like, maybe it has a German name for some other reason, and then yeah, but yeah, it's I never knew that history of Mexico, so it was definitely eye-opening for sure.
Yeah, definitely. But okay, so I'm gonna use this as a transition point to kind of like let's go into the film. We've established the context. We've established, you know, what we're viewing in the sense of who we are viewing, I should say. But yeah, so this film, Silent Night, is classified as the genre of slow cinema, and we obviously see that in the first 5 minutes of that opening shot of like night turning into dusk, turning into morning. And I mean, you know, the audio, the sound, that right there, I think was just incredible. And it, throughout the entire film, the sounds that we hear with these very long takes and with a narrative that is fairly minimal, you know, minimal dialogue, minimal narrative. We do just see these, like, I think there is maybe a total of like a dozen scenes, if you think about it. Just like, you know, not much is really going on, yet so much is happening, and we just like kind of really get absorbed into this world through the aesthetics and like the genre that we're viewing is again this slow cinema. So I don't know, what are your thoughts on that? What kind of feeling did you get after, you know, we saw that opening 5 minutes and now we're sitting at the breakfast table? And
Yeah. So my genuine first impression was confusion. And
fair.
also like not understanding what language they were speaking because I wasn't sure, and I'm not very familiar with like European languages generally. And so I did read a little bit to make sure that I was watching the right film. And then, that first opening scene, like the second scene, I guess, of them sitting around the table and like the kids eating, and like I was like, all right, these are some people that are kind of like the Amish. Got it. But then when he like messes with the clock, or he takes it down, I can't remember, and then he just starts breaking down crying, like that scene to me, like I feel like this film is definitely not for the faint at heart. It's like very emotionally heavy.
Mm-hmm.
Like all of the emotions are very heavy in it, but that scene in particular, like, I mean, I was like, damn, what was he thinking of to like make himself cry like that hard? And like, just, I don't know, it was really intense, especially for him being a non-actor. I'm just like, the fuck? What were you thinking about, So that scene was super intense. One of the scenes, there's actually two scenes that there's three scenes that I keep thinking about a lot.
Mm-hmm.
The first scene is when they're bathing in the river, and at first I was like, are they swimming? And then there was the introduction to soap. So I was like, okay, they're bathing. But one thing that I just kept thinking about is when the man is like washing his daughter's hair, he's washing it so rough. And like in my head, I was like, nobody washes hair like this. Like I've never seen anybody wash hair like this. There was so much soap in it. And it was just, that scene was like so awkward, but I feel like it was purposefully awkward, but like he was so rough. And then I laughed when he said, "You make good soap," because I was just like, I don't know, I just thought it was funny. So that scene, I keep thinking about it visually in my head.
Yeah.
The second scene I keep thinking about visually in my head is when I actually didn't know that they were the Mennonites, right, until afterwards. So there's the scene after he like meets up with his affair lady, Marianne, and his kids are like just watching TV in a van.
Yeah, Bobby's van.
Yeah, but they're like watching some like I was like, when was this from like the 1960s, like the video that they were watching? Also, who was that person? And then like that they were watching, like I want to track down like whatever performer that was. And then the third scene that I thought a lot about was when they're on the ranch and he starts singing that country song.
I love that scene. I
Yeah.
absolutely, for one, all three of those are just kind of like very different scenes, uh, and invoke a lot of different emotions. But yes, like I don't want to cut you off here, but yeah, that scene of him driving in circles in the truck, and the diegetic music of the radio just comes in, and it's just like, oh my gosh, like I just love that. And that like really kind of, all right, I'm watching an art film. This is not, again, for the faint of heart. This is a film that does take a lot to watch and demands a lot. So yeah, and that motion of kind of just going in circles, um, I don't know, it really spoke to me in a way that I think that's like a form of realism, yet a taste of creative touch and a creative signature from the director that like blended so well and kind of just like made me feel really good that in that simple interaction between the two men, like they are enjoying it so much, and like he's just having a grand old time, like kind of going in circles singing along to the song, and it like made me feel really good. So yeah, I think this movie like can create like a very strong emotional touch with it. So um it's interesting that you like point out that scene specifically, but yeah, the other two, um totally agree with you there.
Yeah, and it was interesting because like other than the hair washing scene, Like the other two scenes, they're basically doing things that they're not supposed to be doing. So he's like letting his kids watch TV after he just like had sex with a woman that he's having an affair with. And then, you know, he even does like the little dance in the ranch when he's hearing the song. And like, I'm sure they're not supposed to dance. They're definitely not supposed to listen to music. So if you like strip away the religion, they're just normal people, like just living. You know, like if you strip that part of it away, specifically in those scenes too. But I also like wondered, like that scene of the kids watching TV in the van, which was obviously just so weird anyway. Like, I don't know, that whole scene was very weird. But like, I just like wonder, it's so real that it makes you really believe that these people are real. And so I found myself thinking, I wonder if the kids are thinking in their head, I shouldn't be doing this, but I am doing this and I'm enjoying it. Same thing with the music. I don't know. It got me thinking a lot about like almost kind of having like an existential crisis in my head about these people where I'm like,
Yeah.
are they following this religion because they actually believe it, or are they following it because they were born into it? And like this story is kind of telling the story of so many people probably throughout, you know, history of all different types of religions and all different types of cultures that are like strenuous on the human soul like that. I don't know. It just got me thinking a lot about that. But yeah, I kind of sidetracked. Sorry.
No, I actually like never really thought about that in a more, you know, a broader magnification of that, of taking a look at that. But yeah, so I rewatched the movie and noticed, you know, these kids are watching not only TV, but they're watching someone kind of like perform and sing. It's a very strange um, video that they're watching. It's black and white. It's definitely, I think, yeah, like 60s era French singer performer. And so I didn't look up the dialogue from it because there are no subtitles from it, but I do speak French. So hearing what he was saying, it's basically like he's just super lonely and he's like, I have my opinions. And he keeps repeating, like, I have my opinions. And he goes on to talk about some other stuff, and I'm not like, it was a couple of days ago that I watched the movie, so I need to refresh myself. I'd love to see what exactly he was talking about. But yeah, these kids who their dad basically is just, yeah, like having sex in a motel room with another woman, and they are supposed to be at the dentist, yet they're in the van of some redneck dude named Bobby who speaks English. And it's just like, who the hell is Bobby? Why is he in this van? Why is he in this like town? And why does he have like 3 kids in his van watching this movie? It's just like so absurd, yet you believe it because, again, yeah, you're absorbed into this story and it's just so casual and it's just like accepted. And you know, again, the dad is indulging in sin and the kids are now indulging in what the forbidden fruit of like watching television, exposure to society. And then the dad just like joins right in. And it's just, that was so awkward.
He's like, scoot over.
Yeah, he just like makes some room and then he just leaves Marianne. And like the guy, he's like, okay, Marianita, like, let's close the door. And then she just like leaves. Oh no.
Oh,
Hello?
oh yeah. Okay, you're not frozen anymore. You were frozen for a minute.
Okay. I heard you, the last thing I heard you say was like, oh yeah. But
Oh, I was just, and then you froze, and then I was like, can you hear me? Are you frozen? Oh, I fucking forgot about that scene. Like, so he walks up to the van, he puts his hand behind him, and then she's like secretly holding his hand. And I'm just like, dude, you don't give a fuck. Like, you're basically like, okay, yeah, I know I'm having an affair. I'm literally not trying to be secretive. about it at all. Like, I'm straight up in public, in broad daylight. My children are right here doing something bad. He's holding her hand, and then he gets and he doesn't even say bye. Like, he just says, like, move over, and then he gets in the van, and then they just shut the fucking door in her face. That's so fucked up.
Okay, yes, and that, like, because just prior to, there's a sex scene, which there's no nudity in the film for anyone who hasn't seen it, but it's a very realistic sex scene, and we've briefly talked about that before starting this recording. But anyway, so she tells Johann, like, this is the last time, like, poor Esther. She is obviously feeling guilty, but she even, like, explicitly says, I don't regret anything. This is the saddest yet the most, like, the best time of my life. And so again, she's like, this is the last time, kind of insinuating, like, you need to be faithful to your wife. And then she's the one who reaches her hand over, and, like, okay, yeah, Johann is obviously, like, doesn't care whatsoever. And I don't know, I guess, like, watching this movie for a second time, I kind of realized, like, the inherent, like, toxic masculinity, like the machismo, that, like, even though these people aren't quote unquote like Mexican, he still just, like, follows into these, like, very traditional, like, machismo, like, uh, poor traits, and he's got this, like, okay, have you ever seen the movie Le Bonheur, like Happiness by Agnes Varda?
I haven't actually, no.
Okay, so this is that film was I think in 1963, maybe 1964, but it's another love triangle in which the man has a family, and then he's got a very young and pretty wife, but also his wife, or he's got a young and pretty mistress, but also his, like, wife is very beautiful, and he's like, tells his wife, oh, I found another woman, but it's okay, like, we can just, like, be double happy, and basically invites, like, this woman to join the family. And his wife is, like, a little hesitant at first, and then she just kind of goes along with it. And I hope I'm not spoiling this for anyone else, but, like, very similar things happen with Esther and the wife of the wife and the mother of the children of the protagonist in Happiness, in Le Bonheur. Anyway, very much like a feminist film as to, like, how shitty men can be. And I think that this film is so subtle in that, yet at the same time just screaming it out, because it's, like, not in the forefront talking about, like, toxic masculinity. We're more dealing with, like, existential threat of, like, existence and, like, moral contemplations. But I think inherently there is, like, a lot of toxic masculinity in this film, like, that is represented by Johann, and he only goes to seek out advice from his best friend Zacharias, and then his dad. Like, he doesn't want to talk to his mom. He doesn't, it's just, like, men doing men things, and, like, men reinforcing men's behavior, rather than, like, a mother or, like, another woman figure listening to Marianne, for example, like, this needs to be the last time. We need to, like, stop this. He
Right.
just continues to, I don't know, he doesn't ever seek the opinion of a woman. He never listens to the opinion of a woman. But
Yeah.
that's just something I noticed. Yeah.
Yeah, which I think is interesting because in, Mexican culture and just Latinx culture in general, it's very much like you have matriarchs, right? Like, like the women in the house kind of lead. And it also feels that way. I mean, I don't know that much about the Mennonites, but the way that it was portrayed in the film is a matriarch as well. Like, the men go work, but the woman is the head of the household, like, and so I thought that that was interesting too, because I was thinking about that a little bit. And then I was also thinking about, like, as you were talking, is this band this 90s band that, like, no one cares about, but they have a lyric to a song, and it's just one sentence, and it's why, because man will always be man, and that's the only lyrics in the entire song. And that's kind of what I was thinking about when you were talking, is like the toxic masculinity and like misogyny and like machismo, like in general, like is transcendent through all types of culture. And just because you are like on some like moral high horse, which is, you know, how I personally view extreme religion, that's very judgmental, is like it's oftentimes filled with machismo because of that, because there's this like, I'm holding myself to this higher standard, but I'm also like directly doing things that are not morally, you know, like I like personally, I value like being honest with people over like praying. Whereas like in this film, it's like I honor praying versus being honest with people. So it kind of like sheds light on like the, what is the word, like contradictory.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
That cognitive dissonance of like, I'm praying, I have a, and okay, so like this is an interesting, I guess, like example or a further reinforcement of this patriarchy, this misogyny that we see in Johann, is that like he, you know, is the provider of the family, in the sense that like, you know, he goes out and works and like comes home with, I guess, like money, I don't know, you know, of course, like we see Esther, we hear Johann say like, oh, you make good soap. She is seen at the breakfast table at the very opening scene, like feeding the child the cereal, like, you know, having him open his mouth and whatnot. She brings lunch to Johann when he's out there working in the farm, and she's out there working in the farm too. You know, it's not as if it's just Johann, but yeah, there are these like sorts of notions of like, I guess, like chivalry in the sense that like he is on this high horse and like justifying himself as like, oh, I'm the man, I'm providing, I'm like, you know, watching out, so I'm okay, you know, I'm like playing my good role, I'm doing my good part as being a man. Yet at the same time, he's like completely dishonest, he's like praying but actively like indulging in sin and temptation, and, you know, directly harming his wife. And I guess like what you had mentioned about being honest, versus him like praying, is that he mentions to his friend, I think, or no, he mentions to his father that he's like, oh, I've told Esther everything since the very beginning. Like he's been completely open about his affair with Marianne to his wife, yet he still goes and like sees her, and he's like dishonest against himself and dishonest against his religion, but like he's honest with his wife, which is weird, and it doesn't excuse anything. Like that bit of honesty like does not outweigh the emotional like trauma that he's creating for Esther.
and also like the power dynamic, like
Mm-hmm.
telling your wife that you're cheating, but you're in like this like religious like cultural group, that, you know, the man is the man and the woman is the woman. What the fuck is she supposed to do with that information? It's not like she can go and be like, okay, well, this is fucked up, fuck you, I want a divorce. She knows that that's not allowed. So what, like literally, he's not telling her the information because he cares about her. It's kind of like the thing when they say people are cheating and it's like, oh, I feel so bad, I want to, you know, tell them I want to come clean. And it's like, who is that really for? Is that for you? Is that for your conscience? Or is that for the benefit of the other person? You know, like, because I don't know. So she like is left without choices. Like, okay, he's cheating on her, what can she do? And that kind of like makes me think of that ending, the ending, if we're okay to talk about the ending, when she dies. And it's like, was that her only freedom? Did she only feel freedom in death?
Damn.
Because when they're talking in the room, when she's talking to Marianne and she comes back to life, which I'm still fucking confused about, when she goes back to life, and she goes, what about what's his name? Johan?
Johan, yeah.
What about Johan? And she goes, and then Marianne goes, he'll be fine. So it's almost like she's like, all right, I'm fucking free. So that's why I was like, is she dead? And she's just being like, okay, well, what about him? Or is she alive and now she's free? Like like I'm still like, and I need to read about it, but I feel like my girl Esther wasn't crying because she loved him so much and she was so sad. I think she was crying because she was trapped. And like, that's how I kind of like took it as, because when they were in the car and she was like, remember when we would go on these car rides, and like, she's not fucking happy either, but she can't do anything. Like, and then so she just dies.
Yeah, no, that's a really good reading of that. I guess like without putting into words, watching this movie for the second time and seeing that scene where she gets out of the car and, you know, takes that blue umbrella, that fucking blue umbrella that we then later see, it's like that right there is just so powerful. But what we see with that blue umbrella, and she, you know, goes off into the woods and just starts crying again without putting it into words. I got the notion that she was like just so frustrated, you know, this sense of like helplessness and just like the victim of this power dynamic that she is trapped in. Like, obviously, you know, she loves this person, and, you know, we hear them both say like, I love you to each other, and they reciprocate that. So yeah, like, you know, there is like a bond between the two. They both have children, so they both like are deeply connected in this way. But yeah, I don't think that it's out of the hurt that she's feeling from it. It's more of like that helplessness and that frustration. I don't know, what the way you put it was just spot on. So that was really well said.
Well, and she literally says, don't follow me. Like, she runs away and says, don't follow me. Like, she's just like, it's like she's running away. And when she dies in that scene, it was just really weird. Like, I feel like that part was really weird for me. I actually watched it a couple times because I was like, I mean, I'm very morbid and like very into morbid anatomy things. And I was just like, what is happening? Like, because she's crying. And then you see her kind of slowly going down the tree. And I'm like, how? Like, so I like watched it a couple times and then, yeah. But I mean, and when I think about it, I was like, well, how could that scene have ended any other way? You know, like what, he goes and finds her and she's the damsel in fucking distress, and he goes and finds her and brings her back to the car. Like, in that, to me, that scene was so powerful. And then also when he brings her body, he's like crying, and she's left. She's found a way to leave him and like leave what was, you know, causing her so much pain. But yeah, I want to watch it again too.
I mean, yeah, it's there's so much to be said about all of this. And I guess like to kind of feed off of what you're saying with like morbidity and death and this kind of like unknown sort of explanation as to how she died. You know, the next scene is him carrying the body, and then jump after that, they're in a hospital and he's just sitting there like kind of in shock. The medical doctor comes in and tells him, hey, you know, your wife died of what appears to be a massive heart attack. She could have been tired or she could have been obese. And it's like obviously she's not obese. She like maybe emotionally tired, but like I think she just like lost the will to live. And like maybe she wanted to die, just as you were saying, because she found that as her only option to be free. um I don't know. Yeah, there's like, when I think of, it's so hard for me to like think about death in Mexican cinema through my eyes. Like I always try to think of like the director, you know, where the creative, like the perspective is, because like death and Mexico, you cannot separate the two. Like the Mexico, the Mexican culture has such an interesting perspective, such an interesting take on death, that like that simply just doesn't exist in the United States. And like, you know, as you know, you are half Mexican, and I have Mexican roots as well. Like, you know, we kind of get a glimpse into that. But I think like being in Mexico and like experiencing death in Mexico and like kind of living after that and like grieving and all of that, like there is a sort of perspective, and it's a cultural perspective that you gain on death. And so like the way that Regadas kind of like portrays it into this film, with the ending again, kind of like to touch onto that, is like this miracle happens. Like she then comes back to life. She's talking to Marianne. She's talking to her children. And it's like, what? Like, how did that happen? Like everything is so real. And then this like miracle happens. It's just like, what the fuck? I don't know. So do you have anything to say about that? Like,
Yeah, see, like, so when I texted you about it, and I was like, I don't want to ask a stupid question. But like, I didn't view it as a miracle. Like,
okay.
I didn't get that at all, or I didn't get that vibe at all. Like, so I felt like really weird. So like the scene is she asks to see her, right? And then she goes into the room, and then it cuts to her being in the room. And then she's like laying there, and I kept like, the takes are so long, right? So like I kept like, I'm one of those people where I'm like, all right, I'm gonna see if the actor like blinks or like they like swallow or whatever, you know? And then so she like kisses her on the lips, and I was like, that's kind of weird, like she's dead. Like that's just like strange to do. And then the cheek fall, I mean the not the cheek, the tear falls. And then it's just her, right? Like it's just like this shot of an overshot of the body. And then I start to see the character swallowing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, what? Like they're like making it like so apparent that like this person's supposed to be dead, and like I can like see them swallowing. And then so I'm like really looking at the screen, like paying attention, seeing, and then her fucking eyes open. I'm like, what the fuck? And then she just starts talking like nothing happened. And so to me, I didn't feel like it was a miracle. I felt like she was still dead. And like it was like this fantasy of her having this conversation with this woman, because we never see them talk, which is strange. We never see them talk to each other. And also, how big is that community? Y'all don't cross paths, like y'all don't like hang out in the same circles. Like, so we see them talk for the first time, and like the first thing that she asks is if he's going to be okay or whatever, and she's like, he's going to be fine. And that to me signified that she was gone, that she was still dead. And that it was this weird fucked up fantasy. And then when she starts talking to the kids, that's when I started getting confused again, where I was like, okay, if this isn't some fantasy between the woman that was having an affair and the woman that's dead, and her like fantasizing this, now the kids see her. So is she like, so I'm still not, I want to like deep dive, because I'm still not convinced that she's actually alive.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I feel like she was dead. But then when it brings the dad in, but then it cuts. And it's like, oh
you
shit.
never see Johann and Esther speak. They never like experience that reunion. And that's, I guess, the cliffhanger right there. But no, I don't know. I guess like my thoughts are that like this, as you know, we were talking before, this this recording, the sort of like the title of the film, The Silent Light. And through the shots that Regadas uses, we see like the camera, the lights flaring, especially at the end scene. And I think like as Marianne kisses Esther, there is that sort of like, it's hard to put because it's like, it's so metaphysical. It's transcending the real world. There's a whole notion about time in this film that I think like is inherently transcendent of like human experience. And so it is just this like kind of like mystical sort of, I don't know, entity throughout the film, this like light. And, you know, where does the light come from? And we see the sunrise and then we see the sunset. So it's like a full circle of a full rotation of the earth and like coming into light and the light leaving. And anyway, so like as we see, I don't know, I'm just like trying to put this into words again and just like really explain the end of this movie. But I think that, you know, maybe her soul like left her, but she was able to speak as like or as like a living entity, although not in her body. She was like speaking through like her body was the vehicle that this energy, this entity was like speaking through Esther's body to Marianne and to the children, and then just kind of like drifted on, and then we see the sun set. I don't know. I think this miracle, sort of like miracles happen in religion. You know, that's why people. That's one of the reasons why people are religious, is because of witnessing miracles, for example. And so I think that like the religious ties and this miracle happening was something that like kind of confirmed or reaffirmed the beliefs of this community, that like, you know, people do go to another place after death, like there is an afterlife. So I don't know, that's like kind of why I feel like she did come back to life, and then just like almost like Jesus, you know, just coming back from the dead and then going ascension into heaven.
Well, and don't you think it was weird that, okay, so the thing with the clock, like the symbolism, like I didn't really like do a bunch of like research after I watched it, but okay, so that he stops the clock and then he breaks down, and that's at the very beginning of the film. But then when she comes back alive, his dad turns the clock back on.
Mm-hmm.
And then she just wakes up. So I kind of want to like understand what that means, like,
Mm-hmm.
because there is a bunch of time, like, you know, the sunrise and the sunset, it jumping from being like warm outside to it being cold means that a bunch of time has passed. You also you never really understand how much time has passed, like throughout the entire film. Like it's not like any other narrative film where it's like, all right, you go to sleep and then it's the next day or whatever. Like in the scene, like this is very much like the scenes they're not linear. Like it's not like, you know what I'm saying? So I'm just
Yeah.
like, so I'm very confused. Or not confused. I'm very interested in understanding what the clock signified, first off, or if the director even ever, like, you know, told people what it meant. But then like the clock starting again, she woke up. She woke up that second. Like the dad puts the clock and he turns it back on, and then it starts ticking, and then it cuts to them in the room and her eyes open. And I'm like, I'm still not convinced that she's alive though.
That's fair. I mean, yeah, that's honestly, I think with, I don't know, a convincing argument, I would easily be swayed that it was just, she's still dead. I mean, it's hard to like, it's hard to understand. I think it's actually better that we don't understand it, just simply because it's a film and it makes it worthwhile to discuss and to talk about. But no, I mean, you know, the long takes and the slow panning and just like the shots. Time is such a crucial element to the into this film, like us as the audience viewing it, but then also to the characters. You know, there's just so much at play here that, I mean, this is really a powerful film. Like, you know, it just, again, it kind of like really brings you into the emotions and into the world, um again, without ever like mentioning the word Mennonite or like seeing them practice their religion besides praying. You know, we're just dropped into this little community and watching events unfold. So yeah, I don't know. Time is crazy in this, and it's yeah, I don't know. I also noticed that he had the watch on his wrist, and you know, it's just like, oh, you're a farmer, but you got a calculator watch. Like, it was just a little absurd. I think it was intentionally placed, but yeah, just um, kind of wild.
Yeah. One thing that I also forgot to mention that I thought was really like unusual in the film was that there were certain scenes where you were aware there was a camera there because they would, like, there was one scene, I think it was raining or something like that, and there was like actual water on the lens or on whatever, you know, was in front of the lens, and I thought that was interesting. Like a lot of those stylistic choices, like the lens flares, like those, when you have those in your film, you're making the viewer aware that there's a camera,
Hmm.
that there's a camera in between, you know, your actors in your setting and the viewer. And so that almost was like very meta to me, because it was like you're watching a film about people, and these people are real people, and they're also Mennonites, but they're also acting. And so it was like this, it almost like felt a little surreal in a way, even though it was so real, it also felt surreal.
Hmm.
Because I was just like kind of thinking of the layers, and you know, horror movies do like where they have like the blood splatter or like the, you know, the water or whatever on the lens, but I've never really seen it done in just like a film that's basically like a character study of a group of people, and it's just like I mean, it is like a love story or a drama or whatever, but I thought that was interesting that he wasn't scared for the viewer to be aware that it was a film.
Hmm. Yeah, no, that's quite an observation. I Yeah, I mean, this like sort of realism that Regadas, you know, employs in the film is, I mean, it really does like blur the lines between reality and fiction, and again, like these real life Mennonites acting as Mennonites, but acting, you know, it's like
Yeah.
it is a meta thing, or a meta phenomenon, and that's, you know, this is the first film that I've seen from this director, but he is known to employ non-professional actors. He just gets real people to do real crazy stuff that, and like subjugates his characters, his cast to do stuff. And there are a lot of other films that this director had that were remarkable and critically acclaimed. This is the only film, unfortunately, that does not show any sort of like animal cruelty. So I was just like, I can't show anything like that. Like, I don't know, this like, again, fit so perfectly into the series, yet I think most of his other works would have, but like this one just like existed on its own without like any violence or any like nudity or any like animal torture, you know. So um yeah, it's almost, I read this criticism of Regadas that like in his first or second film, there's just stuff that was so um, kind of like begging for attention. It's like, oh, look at me, like I'm an artist, like look at this shot, you know, and look at this character doing this thing who's like not an actor, but like they're just doing it because that they would. And like we can see that in this film, it's like they're milking the cows, and it's like a very step by step process. And so he kind of like does that, but translated across other characters doing other actions. Anyway, just to see that these people in this movie are, I don't know, just just living life and like kind of, yeah, it's really blurred and almost surreal in that way. It's like hyper real.
Yeah.
shout out hyper real.
Yeah.
But
One thing that I wondered is, okay, so we know like all of the people are actual real ass Mennonites. Like, like, well, I mean, yeah, they are. So like, how how did they know how to act in a film if they've never seen films before?
that's such a good fucking question. And like these characters, you can see the kids and you can even see the dad, and like I think Zacharias, the friend of Johann, like look at the camera, and you kind of like, there's a scene where they're like out into the snow after they had just like been in the barn milking the cows, and it seems as if like someone in the production crew or even like Regadas himself is like giving a non-verbal sign to the father, and he kind of like winks and then just like looks back. And again, it's like this imperfect film, this film that is aware of itself and makes the audience know that it's a, you know, they're watching a film because of the lens flares and because of the water. But yeah, like these kids are directed to be doing something, which is like a big shout out on Regadas for his direction of like this play with his characters. But like, yeah, they slip up sometimes and like look directly at the camera, especially in that water scene where they're bathing in the river. There's a lot of moments where their like eyes are kind of like back and forth. But no, these characters, these people, these non-professional actors, uh, they're doing a phenomenal job. I think that, I mean, that just speaks volumes as to that interaction, that like dynamic between the cast and the crew that like is utterly a mystery. You know, how did this get filmed, and what was the process of all of this? Is like they're just, they made it work somehow, you know. And again, it's a mystery. It's, they're acting really well, they're just being themselves, but like they don't let it like slip up so much.
Yeah, like it's so wild because you have actors, or you have filmmakers like Harmony Korine, Werner Herzog, Terrence Malick that have worked with people that aren't professional actors. Like Linda Manns wasn't a professional actor, who was in like Gummo and shit, not Badlands, but the other Terrence Malick film. And but they'd seen movies, you know, they like live they lived in, you know, the modern society. So
Yeah.
like that's one thing, but then you have another thing where it's like, I've never seen a movie. You know, like what's a computer?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And that's like, you know, why these kids were so amused. Even Johann was so amused at watching this like Frenchman on this little tiny TV box inside of a van. They're just like, we don't understand what he's saying, but like people are laughing and people are applauding, and like he's kind of funny, but like it's all nonverbal. I don't know. Yeah, it's like there's no basis. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just
Unless they're like the actors and they secretly watch TV. Like the actors in the film.
yeah, no, for sure. That's something that like, you know, I was having a conversation, you know, via text with a friend about this movie because I had, you know, I had introduced the film at the beginning of last week, and this is what we're watching, and it's about Mennonites, or it features Mennonites anyway. So this friend of mine reached out, and he's like, "Oh, hey, I read about that. It's kind of like a fucked up cult that they live in." And I was like, "Oh shit, like what?" You know, I just thought it was like this religious group that like kind of was isolated and self-sufficient. But actually, you know, like he had taken some course in college and kind of got some insight to their practices and their settlements in Mexico. And basically like there are people who drink alcohol and like listen to music, and for certain extreme cases, like people get ostracized for wanting to break free and be more modern and wanting to participate in watching music or listening to music or watching films, that it is kind of like a cult status, that like there's a lot of hypocrisy, what you were saying, similar to like that high horse, the mental high horse of or the moral high horse, where we're abstaining from
purity and like
the purity. Yeah, no, that's a good way to put it, or a good word for it, is this like we are pure and untainted from this like mark of society that like the internet and influences from demigods, yet secret, with the light or with the shades pulled down, like we're drinking alcohol, we're listening to music, smoking cigarettes. And unfortunately, something that I've also like got into with the research that I did is that like Miriam Tays, the novelist from Manitoba, so she has been like a big advocate for speaking out against sexual abuse and sexual misconduct from the clergy of the Mennonite community. So like that does exist, it's in the guise of religion and purity, like there's obviously like fucked up shit going on. And this, like, again, what my friend had said, like this cult like mentality of being ostracized if you want to leave or want to participate in modern society.
Yeah, there's this show, and I can't remember what it's called. I don't think it was Mennonite. I think it was Amish, and it was on like regular cable. Maybe it was on HBO, and it followed people that were basically wanting to leave it. So wanting to leave the religion and the compound or whatever the hell they call them, and they would get I'm like butchering my memory. I think in whatever group it was, they get like one day when they turn like 18 or 21 or something, where they can go off of it and they can basically do whatever the fuck they want, and then they have to come back. But this whole show it shows these like kids that have never fucking left, getting fucking wasted, doing tons of drugs, like going fucking insane. And this it's like a docu-series show, follows a few of them that don't want to go back. And so they're like, I just want to keep doing this forever. They're like in like hotel room just getting fucked up. But then it like talks about the complexities of like, yeah, I'm going to lose everything, or like, I can never talk to my family again. I can't remember. If I find it, I'll shoot it to you, because it kind of has like a real life glimpse into like how fucked it is. And like, I feel that way towards every religion. I feel like every religion is under the guise of oppression, and that's why I'm atheist. But I mean, obviously, like there are extremes in everything, right? Like there are extreme atheists as well that are like bullshit. Yeah, I thought that was, I want to read about the Mennonites now. Like I want to do a deep dive.
No, I mean, that's first off, that's like a really interesting concept to like create in a docu-series. Obviously, like I'm all for people doing whatever they want, like as long as it doesn't hurt other people. So for the kids who don't want to go back and like just want to get fucked up, like you do you be. So that's funny, and that's also just a reality that people experience. And just I'm ever thankful for the fact that I'm not in a cult. And just
I'm thankful too.
Yeah, just gotta say it real quick. I'm not in a cult. I do work at Juice Land, so maybe maybe they're all about the juice and I swallowed the Kool-Aid. But anyway, so far it's good. But yeah, no, that's wild how yeah, some of these people just have to like literally break free and like excommunicate themselves, whether by choice and like consciously being aware of it, or just like by circumstance, for the fact that like, you know, you slip up but you don't get a second chance.
Mhm.
And I guess like, you know, maybe that speaks to Esther, the character in the film, who she dies and like, you know, I don't want to be a part of this, so it's either like all or nothing. You know, it's such an extreme, it's such like absolutism in thinking and, you know, application into behavior, that, you know, she dies and is transcended into this like spiritual entity of time and space and metaphysics, and I don't know. So maybe that's like another commentary that perhaps, you know, Miriam Tays, the novelist, had for the influence of Esther as the character. But who knows? You know, there's so many questions to ask about that.
Yeah, that's true because I don't know that much about the Mennonites. So maybe if we knew more about them, that whole scene would make more sense because there was
Mm-hmm.
also like a long time ago, my mom said something that was really weird, and so I posted about it on the internet. My mom said, "I wonder if when we died, we just go to other planets." And I was like, "What?" And so I just put it on the internet, and then somebody was like, "Is your mom Mormon?" And I was like, "No." And they were like, "That's what Mormons believe." And I was like,
Whoa.
"What?" So maybe Mennonites believe some weird ass shit like that. I don't know. Any
Damn.
Mennonites listening, comment, like below, subscribe.
Also, if you're listening to Spotify or watching YouTube, like, hell yeah. um, no fucking clue. I have no real idea about Mormons. You know, I'm atheist myself, so I don't know what to believe or what to expect
Yeah.
from this community. And yeah, I mean, again, like, it's kind of strange how like Miriam Tays is a novelist, because like that means she's like gone through publishers and like, you know, she's had a lot of interviews and been a public speaker, you know, giving seminars or whatever. Like, she's out in the public, you know, she's not just like under a rock in a house in a Mennonite colony. She's just kind of like a secular, you know, modern person,
Mhm.
who she speaks like fluent English. You know, she also speaks this like Plattdeutsch, whatever. Um, so yeah, she's involved, but like, you know, a sort of like kind of leaning to identity pools of this Mennonite and perhaps like a Canadian, or I don't know. I'm just speculating actually, so don't quote me on this. If I'm wrong, then I'm wrong. But it appears that she is more in the public than most would be, and kind of like allowing herself, or at moments allowing herself to uh, talk about this stuff at large. So who
Mhm.
knows? Who knows? But
Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of weird actually. So to talk about the film and then to sidestep onto Miriam Tays. Um, so she wrote this book called Ima Voth. Don't know, that's probably in that language, but anyway, so basically she writes about a young woman who is living in this community, and a very popular, famous director, filmmaker comes to the community and starts making a movie. So the movie is like the influence of the director in her novel. Like, she writes this novel directly from her experience with the movie. So it's like a film within a novel that she then later published. It's fucking weird, like, to even think of that, and like to know that that exists solely based on the film that Regadas like made.
So she wrote, let me make sure I understand. Okay, so
Yeah,
they make the film, and then after she makes the film, she writes a book about a girl who has a director come and make a film.
correct.
What the fuck?
Yes. Okay. So that exists. That is a novel, a fictitious novel that is like so obviously influenced by this experience, this film being made in a Mennonite community. And
And
it's
then,
like
so I want him to now make a movie about.
about her
Okay,
escaping and just never coming back, and that's part of the
yeah,
docu-series.
yeah. The movie
Oh,
is the book, and the book is the movie. Oh my god!
it's
But
all full circle.
maybe they should, instead of Mennonites, they should be calling it Mennonites. Sorry, I'm just waiting for that. My
Oh.
bad.
I love it. Oh my gosh. Yeah, just call up Regadas and just ask him literally what the fuck he was thinking.
Yeah, that's insane.
Oh my goodness. That's a great joke. That's so good. Dang. Well, uh I guess on that note, have you got any other sort of thoughts into the movie? I feel like this whole film could be dissected in hours. That's the beauty of movies. That's the beauty of cinema. Um, Unfortunately, we don't have hours upon hours, but yeah, I don't know. What any sort of closing remarks, perhaps, or anything like that you want to add?
I would say, all jokes aside, it's a really beautifully shot film. I think that maybe because I don't know a lot about Mennonites, some of it kind of is lost in translation, even in the imagery. So, personally, what I'm probably going to do is I'm going to read more about the Mennonites and then rewatch it and see if it changes any of my opinions. Um, and I wonder if other people have done this too, like this exact thing, because
Yeah.
the ending still, it's still like I'm still very like, I'm the type of person that I want to know, which is very hilarious because I'm like super into experimental film and surrealism. But like, I want to know every like detail of why it is that happened the way it is. Like, I don't like any mystery. I want to know fucking everything. And so I haven't found anything online about the ending. And so I'm
Mm,
like, okay, maybe if I like dive deeper, go into some Reddit threads, like read about the Mennonites, maybe it'll make more sense to me because it's such a fucking bizarre ending and it really caught me off guard.
yeah.
So what? But
I mean, yeah, the question still perplexes us. Like we have come to know,
right.
no, we just speculated here. We come to know further realization or further insight into it. But if you do come across any of that, like please share. I'll probably do the same in like maybe a year, just because I don't know, for the fact that this movie, in the genre of slow cinema that it is, like it's emotionally demanding, and like fuck, you really feel those moments of the people crying, the as we talked about earlier, that scene in which he's driving in circles, like that moment of pure joy. um there's a lot of imagery of characters just kind of like looking out into windows and like just thinking, they're all silent, everyone, it's minimal dialogue, so like yeah, people are silent, people are thinking, and you kind of feel as if you're getting into their heads. So it's a taxing movie. It's not an easy movie to just like watch in passing. You have to pay attention, and it's 2 hours long, so like yeah, you really have to invest like an evening. And if you want to rewatch some scenes, like by all means, like 2.5 hours. It's a lot. So
Yeah.
I think that this film has been a really like awesome experience for this series, and then just for me personally to like, as I mentioned, I just found this movie because the other one wasn't available, and I was just like, oh man, just scrambling, and so like watching it, and just like my association with it there, and like the emotional investment and involvement that the movie demands, it's like I'll watch this in a year and maybe I'll have a better perspective on it. And yeah, we'll see about that.
Yeah.
A
Yeah,
year is,
I think the only part that I'm probably gonna rewatch is like up until like her dying and then everything after that, so I can like better understand it. But specifically just her coming back alive, I'm just so confused by that. But I will let you know if I find anything online about it.
yeah,
They
no,
wrapped
that's
it up in a tiny little bow thread.
yeah, it's that it's that grandfather clock. I think that has everything to do with it. So,
Mhm.
but that's not a profound thought. It's
Yeah,
what we see.
yeah.
But yeah, no, I think we're kind of approaching an hour and a half mark at this point. So I think we'll cut it here. For anyone who's still joining us, still listening, if you've seen this movie, you know what we're talking about. If you haven't, why are you listening? um,
Basically ruined it for you.
yeah, but no, Faiza, thank you so much for participating, and I really love this conversation that we just had. It's super. I don't know, just to kind of pick it apart and to hear your thoughts and all of it. I had a really fun time with this. So thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for joining. And again, for all the viewers, all the listeners, you know, thanks for sticking it out this far. Check out week 4. We just announced it yesterday and today. So got a double header for the kind of spooky horror genre of Mexican cinema. So LatinXperience Mexico. We have week 4, the final week, and 2 movies to talk about later on. So anyway, uh, signing off for now, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.